Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first keynote of the 2002 Globe Annual Meeting. I would like to introduce Yvonne Ivey Parker. Yvonne is the project manager for the NASA Transform to Open Science Initiative, a $40 million 5-year mission focused on transforming the global science community to move toward opening up the scientific process for all. Yvonne is extremely passionate about engaging with historically excluded communities to close the digital divide and to create pathways for minorities in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She brings her expertise in operations, knowledge management, product design, and data governance to support automation, scalability, and action-oriented intelligence across distributed teams through the lens of diversity, inclusion principles. Yvonne currently lives in Washington, D.C., USA, with her husband and 2 dogs. She holds a master's in library and information sciences from the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas. And she received her bachelor's in English literature from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome, Yvonne. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Grace, for the lovely introduction. Just let me know if you can hear me.
Can hear you great.
Perfect. I'm very excited to be here today. As Grace mentioned, my name is Yvonne Ivey Parker, and I'm the Transform to Open Science Program Manager at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. In the United States. It's a privilege to be speaking to so many educators around the world who are and have always been at the forefront of advancing the future of science, as well as the future scientists who lead those innovations beyond our imagination. If we could go to the next slide, Grace. My own fascination with one back. Perfect, okay. My own fascination with data and the organization of knowledge began when I was a student. I had an incredible librarian in elementary school. Her name was Miss Nolte. I still bother her today, who opened my eyes and hearts to the world of books. A decade later, I received my master's degree and was working across the National Archives. I started in Texas, and then I moved up to DC, and I was doing a joint program at the Library of Congress, as well as the National Archives, which is the home of the United States collective knowledge across those 2 institutions. While I was working at the National Archives, we were undergoing a huge effort to digitize all of the nation's records. That was the beginning of a great shift in knowledge across the world. We were shifting from paper all the way to online and the future of how knowledge was shared and stored. It was very exciting. And with that, I'm going to share just a quick story I have that I believe illustrates this evolution and the inevitable changes that comes as we prepare for the stewardship of science and data in the hands of future generations. If you look at the picture on the slide, and you see all the Mario, that's my godson. So the story is really about him. So my godson currently is a middle schooler at a local public school in Alexandria, Virginia, here in the States. And every summer I pick him up for a week and we try to jam as much fun into 7 days as possible. In one summer, about 5 years ago, I took him to the Library of Congress so he could really understand what I do for work. I was really honestly just trying to get some bonus cool points because he was getting at an age where he was not at all interested in anything that was in a book. And so as we regaled through, as we walked through the halls, I regaled stories of all the incredible works of art that filled the building. And I spoke of how every single book that had ever been published lived at the Library of Congress, and how one day he could get a library card and visit whenever he wanted and read all the books and listen to all the music and audiobooks available. But as I went on, recalling my first time in the library and how much I enjoyed getting lost in books, I realized all he really wanted to do was play on his Nintendo Switch and build worlds in Super Mario Brothers, and then sit and analyze the download stats. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting talking to him about this keynote. His school actually engages with Globe, which is really exciting. And I was sitting asking him about how many more worlds he built in Mario Kart. And he was showing me on his Switch quite enthusiastically how to create a world map complete with bridges and hills and customize course icons and background elements and a variety of cosmetic themes for this world. He is about 5 now. He wanted to make sure I told everyone that. Um, but his worlds that he is creating are made available to everyone around the globe who can play and compete and leave comments and give him more ways to improve his worlds. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good game of Mario Kart, but I share this story as it's one of the many tales that points to the exhilarating signs that the world is changing. Although I grew up with a plethora of handheld devices, Game Boys, iPods, flip phones, Walkmans, it is true that times are changing and electronics are advancing. Not only that, but getting smaller. We're at a point in history where a young kid can build a virtual world for the whole world to play on. And that's from a Nintendo Switch. This is one example of how science and technology is changing and how we interact and share information on a global scale. And our youth are leading the way. So I want to pause here, just kind of highlight some of the pictures here on the screen right now before I really jump into my presentation. So I came to NASA roughly 5 years ago. My technical background is in archival management. I spent roughly 10 years between the Library of Congress and the National Archives, digitizing records and making them available to all. But I did want to highlight some of the many things that are very near and dear to my heart. As you can see, I love being out in nature. I love NASA. We have an exciting mission to really be at the frontier of science and make data and make knowledge accessible for all. I love my 2 pups, as well as just really taking time to explore what's out there. And so I'm here today to talk to you about how all these many things interconnect with why we're all here. And it's to be collaborative, it's to be open, it's to be able to truly share our experiences as broadly as possible. And so I have my Twitter handle. Please feel free to connect with me. And with that, if we can go to the next slide. So the speed of science matters, and that's why I'm here today. About a year ago, I accepted the role to work as the program manager for the Transform to Open Science mission. The TOPS mission is founded around diversity, inclusion, as well as belonging, to truly make NASA data, as well as publications, public access, available for all, regardless of where you sit. Next slide. And so when I joined this mission, my focus was really to not only invest my heart and my mind, but my time into building solutions that create opportunities for communities to open more doors that enable science for their specific community. And so what is open science? Open science is a collaborative culture enabled by technology that empowers the open sharing of data, information, and knowledge within the scientific community and the wider public to accelerate scientific discovery and understanding. And so if you've seen this pinwheel on the screen, accessibility, reproducibility, and inclusion are at the core of open science. Next slide. Here at NASA, for the next 5 years, we'll be focusing on what we're calling open source science. Open source science is NASA's method to put open science into practice. We develop a strategy to really open the door for all to not only maximize the scientific return of NASA data, but also broaden that participation of folks who typically have been historically excluded from science. And so our focus of the strategy is opening the entirety of the scientific process from start to finish. And Allison talked a little bit about that earlier when she was describing the shifts in the protocols, broadening community involvement in the scientific process. And so moments like this, when I'm able to kind of jump on and have conversations with folks although I really miss going in person to meetings. Increasing the accessibility of data, software, and publication. So really leaning in and looking at our policies and practices that are currently in place and pushing them to be more open. And then focusing on facilitating inclusion, transparency, and reproducibility of science. And the Globe community does that. You know, when I've spoken to so many folks who, regardless of their tenure in science, whether they're in elementary or have our parents who have worked with schools that um, focus on Globe education. Everyone's always talking about how students are able to take NASA data and reproduce projects. And I think that that in itself is truly a representation of what open science is. Next slide. And so many folks are asking why now. I was sharing with the host prior to the start of this that there's challenges that we're all being faced with, you know, climate change, COVID-19, the shifts in accessibility to information and knowledge. And the goal is to really take these current challenges and use open science to begin to mitigate as well as solve them. And so I like to when I describe why now, we have the resources, we have the minds, but we also have what's needed within ourselves to know that things are changing and we must do all that we can to truly lean in and recognize what's ahead of us. But more importantly, to reduce these inequities while advancing science. Before I came to NASA, I never really described myself as a researcher, although I spent many years doing a lot of research around preservation of historical records. And when I talk to many students as well as researchers about open science, one of the many things that they lean in with the hope of open science is breaking down those barriers for inequities. The goal of open science is to truly make things as accessible as possible for all, regardless of where you sit. Next slide. And so what is the Transform to Open Science initiative? TOPS is the 40 million 5-year NASA Science Mission Directorate initiative geared towards accelerating the adoption and understanding of open science. We have 3 key goals, which are really pushing the understanding and adoption, funding major scientific discoveries, and then lastly, broadening participation by historically underrepresented communities. And we're kicking off in 2023, which is coming up very closely, the year of open science. Next slide. And so what is the year of open science? NASA's 2023 year of open science will be focused on building momentum and support that moves the community towards more openness in science. And I'm happy to share that the Transform to Open Science mission is not just focused on earth science. We're across all of NASA's science domains, and the focus is to truly create a scientific community that has an equal level playing field. And to do that, we've really structured it around these 4 pillars: engagement, capacity sharing resources, incentives, and then moving toward openness. I'll talk a little bit about all of those components later on in the slides, but the goal is to truly get the community leaning in through recognizing open science practices, holding open public meetings, sharing hidden knowledge, and then really just being inclusive in our collaborations. We recognize that in order to change the way we work, changing the way we collaborate and contribute to others' work, we must reimagine how we do science. And to do that, I know it's a little scary. You know, when I joined the team, my focus was, well, what if someone is maybe doesn't understand what I'm articulating or doesn't see the sense of urgency in what I'm doing? We realized that to actually change the world, we need to have a seat at the table for everyone. And TOPS will do that. Next slide. And so how are we going to do this? We're opening up science for all. TOPS is currently designing what we're calling an open core. It's an open science curriculum. And for folks on the call, you're all welcome to actually engage with our curriculum. It will be free and it will be structured around these core principles, which we're calling the 5 modules. As you can see, they're outlined in a scientific workflow. And so kicking off with the ethos of open science, which goes around what is open science, why does it benefit me, how does it benefit the broader scientific community, and then leaning into open tools and resources. So what are those popular open science tools? As I shared earlier, my godson builds worlds in Mario Brothers. And one of the things he's actually been exploring is how to build those worlds via Python. And so really using open science tools, open source tools that enable accessibility for all. And then moving into open software. So how do we share these softwares? If we're doing and working in these various spaces, what are those softwares and what are those implications of how we use those softwares? From there, shifting into open data. There's no reason at all why data shouldn't be as accessible for all. In the open science community, we love to say as open as necessary and restrictive as possible. And so really leaning in and making sure that the use and shareability of data is accessible and as inclusive, keeping in mind that there's PII and HIPAA data that and biological and physical sciences data that can't be shared. But outside of that, there should be no reason why we're not able to take, the Earth observational mosaics that come down from all of these lovely satellites across all of our agencies and make that data available. And then lastly, moving into the open results. And so what are those best practices for sharing all results and analysis, as well as the peer review process? And once you finish all of these 5 modules, you'll receive a NASA TOPS Open Science badge and certification. And so the goal of this is to truly help not only build up the skill sets that many folks need to either land a new job or break into a new career, or just if you're like me, just continual learning. The goal is to truly create a more equitable playing field through the design of Open Core. And I'm happy to share we'll be rolling out the latest, which we're calling the beta version in the next month. So I'll be sure to get that out to the necessary folks so that the Globe community has access to it. Next slide. And so how are we going to kick this into action? We're looking to highlight not only TOPS champions, so scientists and researchers to teach these modules that I just outlined at events, but also lean in because folks have been doing open science for many, many decades and might not have been able to just really put a finger on what it is. We're looking to move into cohorts, so developing teams where learners can engage through virtual cohort models, similar to how with COVID-19, we were thrusted into this virtual space. We're looking to truly lean into virtual cohort models to increase open science badge achievement. We love the idea of summer schools, recognizing that where you are in hemisphere, it might not be a summer school for you, but leaning into having schools that are ran from 8 to 12 weeks where we teach those modules and really engage with folks on a global scale. I'm excited to share that we'll be expanding the curriculum through various competitive outlets where we take our open core design and add it onto what does open core mean to an earth scientist? What does open core mean to an astrophysicist and so forth? And then lastly, hackathons. One of my first times engaging with NASA data was through a hackathon. We love the idea of having competitive opportunities where folks can lean in to a challenge that not only advances their data science skills, but also open science, and then really focus on community building. We find that so many folks tune into hackathons, Wikipedia-thons, and we realize that that could truly transform, but also on a global scale, get folks engaged in problem solving. Next slide. And so I'm getting toward the end of my presentation, but I do want to reiterate that there's a sense of urgency to change the way that we do science. And we need more hands, more minds, more eyes, more hands engaged to truly transform where we're going in the science community. And I firmly believe that open science is a step forward to help our communities better understand how to navigate what's ahead of us. We need everyone to truly transform science. And so I want to thank you all. I thank you for what you do. I think the students, near and far, who have interest in science, because of the work that you do each day, I know we have a bright future ahead. Next slide. I know we don't really have time for questions, but I again, thank you so much to the Globe community for having me.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. We really appreciate it. The Open Science Initiative that NASA is doing and what you're doing with TOPS is amazing and so synergistic with Globe. So thank you so much for coming out. For all of those watching, if you would like to chat with Yvonne, you can do so through the Pathable platform, or feel free to send her an email, reach out to her via Twitter. I don't know, Yvonne, would you want to drop your Twitter handle in the chat?
Sure, I'll drop my Twitter handle as well as our website for the Transform to Open Science mission. We have monthly forums where we're getting folks together to talk about open science. You don't have to be a NASA researcher or a NASA funded researcher to engage with us. Our goal is to truly build a community with folks who are like-minded and really interested in kind of thrusting science forward in an open, collaborative way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that we have several members of the Globe community that would be interested in that. So while you're doing that, again, thank you so much for being our opening keynote for this meeting. I want to encourage everyone to keep looking through the site, visit some of these great resources that Yvonne has shared with you during this break, because after this session, we will be moving on to the community sessions, the first community session, Building a Stronger Globe Community, which will take place from 10:15 to 12:15. There's 2 rooms, room A and B, so you can choose which room that you would like to join. And there's several lightning talks, presentations, and panels going on over those 2 hours within those particular rooms. So feel free to find those links to those sessions within the agenda of the virtual platform. And again, if you have any questions for Yvonne, send them her way. For us at GIO, send them our way as well. And I will end it there. I think, Yvonne, you added it to the chat. So everyone, I'll give people a moment to hopefully transfer those over before we end here. Awesome. Yeah, Earth to Ivy, such a great Twitter handle. All right, everyone. Thank you again, Yvonne. Really appreciate it. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day with the annual meeting, and we'll be seeing you soon. All right. Bye.